I cannot accept this money if those children have to become the backdrop for your generosity. Sophie Ramirez placed the envelope containing $5,000 in front of Lucas Grant, surrounded by cameras and wealthy guests. The entire table fell silent. He did not yet know that her refusal would lead him to a kitchen feeding 50 children, or to money that had disappeared under the name of his own foundation. Only minutes earlier, harbor lights had been glowing during the fundraising gala. Donors raised their glasses beneath a Grantwell Children banner while Sophie served the tables. Through the rain-covered windows, she noticed Jamal Reed standing beneath the entrance canopy. The 11-year-old boy was not looking at the expensive main courses. His eyes remained fixed on a basket of untouched bread near the service station. Sophie entered the kitchen. "Chef Nora, has this bread been served at any table?" "No, anything unused will be thrown away after the event." Sophie checked the ingredients, separately packed the items that contained no peanuts, and carried the food to the employee entrance. She called Jamal by name, confirmed his allergy, and handed him the bag without asking why he was hungry or taking out a phone to photograph him. Lucas was sitting near the window. He had not introduced himself as the founder of Grantwell. He watched Sophie kneel until she was level with Jamal. "The bag with the green label belongs to you. Do not trade it for another bag." After Jamal left, Lucas called Sophie over. The way she remembered a detail that could protect a child's life touched the grief that had led him to establish the foundation after losing his younger sister. He placed $5,000 inside an envelope. "Use this for whatever you were just doing." At that moment, the event photographer turned a camera toward them. Sophie looked at the Grantwell banner behind Lucas as the flash went off, then pushed the envelope back. After her refusal, Marcus Kell, the restaurant's general manager, immediately pulled her aside. "You just embarrassed a major donor in front of the press. I apologize for interrupting the event, but I will not apologize for refusing to turn a hungry child into a prop for a beautiful photograph." Marcus lowered his voice. "You are a server. You have no right to lecture guests about how they give away money." Lucas heard him, but he did not become angry. He took back the envelope and watched Sophie return to another table. Her words did not sound arrogant. They sounded like an old wound that had been hidden for too long. At the end of the shift, Nora inspected the trays of food that had never been served. She recorded the quantities in the transfer log, signed permission for Sophie to take them, and helped move everything into the old car behind the restaurant. Each tray was sealed and marked with the date and time. The transfer form was accidentally placed beneath the inventory ledger when Nora returned to the kitchen. Marcus came outside just as Sophie loaded the final tray into the vehicle. "Are you taking restaurant property?" "Chef Nora authorized it. There is a signed transfer record." Marcus demanded to see the document. When Sophie could not find it immediately, he assumed she was making excuses. "Bring everything back inside. I cannot allow employees to take food and call it charity." Marcus asked Lucas to serve as a witness. Lucas answered, "I saw her move the trays. I do not know whether she had permission, so I will not call it theft." Sophie looked at Marcus. "I can prove it, but I will not expose the address where children eat dinner during an argument in front of customers." Marcus suspended her until the investigation was complete. Sophie removed her employee badge and placed it inside her pocket, but she still closed the car door. If you leave with that food, the situation will become more serious, Marcus warned. 50 children are waiting. They cannot eat a promise that I will be cleared tomorrow. The car left the parking lot. Lucas knew that following her without permission crossed a boundary. But he needed to understand whether he had just witnessed theft or something entirely different. He followed from a distance. Sophie stopped outside St. Anne's Church. She carried the trays through a side entrance and into the basement. Through the open door, Lucas saw nearly 50 children waiting beside folding tables. No one pushed ahead. The older children gave their seats to the younger ones, while several parents remained against the wall so the food could go to their children first. A chalkboard displayed the menu, bus times, and a handwritten sentence. No one has to apologize for being hungry. Sophie called each child by name and checked a blue notebook containing meal records and allergy information. She set aside Jamal's peanut-free meal, then knelt beside a young girl hiding bread inside her coat pocket. Sophie did not take the bread away. Instead, she gave the girl another small paper bag. You do not need to hide it. You will always have food for tomorrow here. For a moment, the memory of hiding bread beneath a pillow when she was 12 appeared in Sophie's eyes. Then she turned back and continued serving without making anyone feel ashamed. Lucas entered. Sophie recognized him immediately, and her calm expression disappeared. You followed me? Yes. I apologize. I crossed a boundary because I wanted to know the truth. How can I help? He started reaching for the envelope, but Sophie pointed toward the sink. If you truly want to help, wash your hands, put on an apron, and join the serving line. Lucas removed his suit jacket and followed her instructions. There were no photographers. He served food, carried trays, and washed dishes. Sophie did not sit down until she had confirmed that every child had received a meal. Only then did she eat a small plate of food that had already gone cold. Helen Park, the community coordinator, placed the blue notebook in front of Lucas. Every donation, meal count, and allergy note had been clearly recorded. She also removed a copy of a Grantwell funding application marked GA 1847. We applied 2 years ago, Helen said. The system confirmed that it received our application. After that, we received no response and no money. Nearby, a child was coloring on an old Grantwell report. Lucas recognized a photograph of the St. Anne's basement with Sophie serving food. The caption beneath it read, $240,000 funded, program completed and verified. When was this photograph taken, he asked. Sophie examined the page. A photographer came here once, took several pictures, and left. No one brought food, equipment, or support staff. Lucas opened the foundation's internal system on his phone. The records confirmed that $240,000 had been fully dispersed and marked as verified. He compared the application code. GA 1847. Sophie took the phone from his hand. Her eyes stopped on the amount that had supposedly been transferred to a kitchen, surviving on money from her own wages. If your foundation sent that money, she asked, who signed for it using my name? Lucas stared at the $240,000 displayed on the screen, then turned off his phone. Before I answer, you need to know who I am. I am the founder of Grantwell Foods and the Grantwell Children Foundation. Sophie placed the phone on the table. So you sat inside the restaurant and watched me return money from your own foundation without saying anything. Then you followed me to decide whether a waitress deserved your money? I crossed a boundary, I apologize. Nothing makes what I did right. Lucas looked around the kitchen. The children's names and images will not be used. I promise. He suggested that the grant discrepancy might have resulted from an administrative error. Sophie opened the blue notebook and turned through pages recording the wages she had contributed, the number of meals served, and every food receipt. An administrative error cannot sign my name, photograph children, and disappear with $240,000. Helen placed a copy of application GA 1847 on the table, along with the confirmation email and the real banking information for St. Anne's Church. Lucas called Rebecca Sloan that same night but did not accuse her. Preserve every record connected to GA 1847 and send me the original transfer documents. Rebecca paused before explaining that St. Anne's did not have the legal status required to receive a large grant, so the money had been transferred through an authorized financial partner. What was the partner's name? Lucas asked. St. Anne Youth Nutrition Initiative. Sophie and Helen looked at each other. Neither had ever heard that name. Rebecca had her first opportunity to tell the truth, but she continued insisting that the program had been completed according to procedure. Lucas issued a data preservation order, hired independent auditors, and rejected the communications team's request to release a reassuring public statement. No statement will be released until we know where the money went. The following morning at Harbor Lights, Nora found the transfer form beneath the inventory ledger. Kitchen security footage also showed her signing it and helping Sophie move the unused food trays. Marcus held the evidence for a long time. Admitting the mistake meant accepting that he had suspended an innocent employee in front of customers. Finally, he called Sophie. Your position has been restored. I apologize for reaching a conclusion before examining the evidence. Sophie did not request personal compensation. I need a written correction, not to embarrass you, but so the next employee is not called a thief simply because that person lacks the power to defend themselves. Marcus signed the statement and sent it to Human Resources and every employee involved. At Grantwell headquarters, the auditors discovered that the photograph from St. Anne's had appeared in the Foundation's annual reports for 3 years. None of the reports listed when the photograph was taken or who had authorized its use. The image data showed that it had been taken before the grant was approved. Sophie provided only copies of the meal records with the children's names removed. When the auditors requested the complete list, she refused. The children do not lose their privacy because adults stole money intended for them. I will obtain permission from their parents first. Meanwhile, David Kwan learned that the audit had begun. Instead of contacting Lucas directly, he approached an independent attorney. David was caring for his sick father and understood that one decision could cost him his job. Even so, he surrendered an orange flash drive marked GA 1847. The files showed that David had warned management that the banking address did not match St. Anne's. Rebecca called it an intermediary structure, then transferred him out of the grants department. Lucas met Rebecca privately and gave her a second opportunity to explain. He placed Helen's authentic application beside Grantwell's transfer records. The receiving address differs from the church address by 1 number. The payment was signed for by Sophie Ramirez, while she always signs Sophie M. Ramirez. How do you explain that? Rebecca remained calm. The accounting contractor may have entered the information incorrectly. Miss Ramirez may also use different signatures. She is exploiting this situation to demand money for a program that was not legally qualified to receive it. The auditors discovered that St. Anne Youth Nutrition Initiative had been registered at a commercial mailbox exactly 1 week before the grant was approved. 2 vendors that received most of the money were connected to Rebecca's brother, Owen Sloan. They submitted invoices for refrigerators, a delivery vehicle, and food that the kitchen had never received. Inside the St. Anne's storage room, the old refrigerator was still held shut with a rubber strap. The delivery vehicle listed on the invoice had never appeared. No new equipment had ever arrived. After Rebecca learned that David was cooperating with the auditors, she immediately issued a termination notice accusing him of copying confidential information. Lucas blocked the dismissal, placed David under whistleblower protection, and required every employment action against him to receive approval from an independent committee. Rebecca attempted to delete the related emails, but the preservation order had been active since Lucas's first telephone call. The system logs showed that her account accessed and altered the files immediately after he requested the transfer records. That evening, Lucas returned to St. Anne's. Sophie was labeling Jamal's food containers. He brought no check. Instead, he placed 8 annual reports bearing his signature in front of her. Rebecca may have written those numbers, but the final signature belongs to me. I trusted summaries and never visited the program myself. That failure of oversight is my responsibility. Sophie looked at him. A private admission inside this basement does not correct reports that used children's faces to praise you. I will make it public. You could lose donors, authority, and your reputation. If those are the only things I protect, then this foundation does not deserve my family's name. Sophie did not forgive him yet. She agreed to participate in the investigation only if the children were kept away from the press and the findings were released to the community instead of being settled privately behind boardroom doors. At that moment, the auditors sent a recovered email. Rebecca had written to the communications team. There's no need for an on-site inspection. Reuse the old photograph. The founder only reviews the summaries. After reading it, Lucas ordered a public hearing before employees, donors, and community representatives. Sophie watched him prepare to face the press. You're about to lose much more than $5,000. Do you still want the truth? Lucas placed the 8 reports inside his briefcase. If I protect only my reputation, then this foundation does not deserve my family's name. 3 weeks later, the Grantwell Auditorium was filled with board members, donors, employees, reporters, and community representatives. Rebecca attended with her attorney. She received access to the evidence and the opportunity to speak before any conclusion was reached. Lucas stepped forward first. Behind him were 8 annual reports that had praised the foundation's achievements. The money carried my name, the reports carried my signature. The failure of oversight belongs to me as well. I trusted summaries instead of visiting the programs to confirm that the help was truly reaching the children. He introduced Sophie as the founder and director of St. Anne's program, not as a poor waitress waiting to be rescued. For 3 years, the kitchen had survived through her wages, community donations, and volunteer work. The audit showed that $240,000 had been approved, but most of it was transferred to a fraudulent organization. 2 vendors were connected to Rebecca's brother, Owen Sloan. Less than $18,000 had actually reached programs serving children. A handwriting specialist confirmed that the name Sophie Ramirez on the contract was forged. The document had been created on a device assigned to Rebecca's office. David Kwan stepped forward carrying the orange flash drive marked GA 1847. He described the email warning that the receiving address did not match St. Anne's and the order to remove the church's real address from the records. Helen presented the original grant application and the church's correct banking information. Nora and Marcus confirmed that the kitchen had survived through authorized food transfers from Harbor Lights, not through Grantwell funding. Tasha Reed spoke on behalf of the parents. "We do not need photographs of our children placed inside reports in exchange for dinner. We need promises to be honored. Families facing hardship still have the right to privacy and dignity." Rebecca stood. She admitted using an old photograph and changing records, but argued that St. Anne's was not legally qualified to receive such a large grant. She claimed the intermediary organization had been created to prevent the budget from being canceled and to keep the foundation's work moving. The auditors displayed an email from legal counsel. They had recommended using a legitimate financial sponsor. But Rebecca rejected that option because it required independent inspections and public disclosure of vendors. Another email showed that she had approved Owen's company before the intermediary organization was registered. Rebecca insisted that she had not taken the money personally, but the false invoices, forged signature, family connections, and deleted records showed that this had not been an emergency solution. The board did not rely on anger. It relied on evidence and voted publicly. Rebecca was removed from her position. Every related payment was frozen. The records were transferred to the authorities, and recovery efforts began against the vendors. David and the other employees who provided evidence received protection. Every other Grantwell program was ordered to undergo a new audit. Sophie did not applaud. One person losing a position could not refill refrigerators that had remained empty. Justice would matter only when the money was returned and the families gained authority over how it was used. Lucas surrendered his power to appoint a majority of the board. The foundation was restructured to include independent members and community representatives. Grantwell restored the full $240,000 through a new fund. The money was not handed directly to Sophie as a personal gift. The St. Anne's Fund was overseen by 5 people: Sophie as program director, Tasha as the parent representative, Helen as the community representative, an independent social worker, and an accountant with no connection to Grantwell. Sophie received a paid leadership position with benefits based on her 3 years of experience. The agreement prohibited Grantwell from using children's images without permission. She accepted the resources but did not surrender community decisions to people who knew St. Anne's only through reports. The program expanded beyond meals. It began offering housing assistance, access to social workers, transportation to school, healthcare support, and employment services for parents. Tasha and Jamal were connected with transitional housing without being separated. Harbor Lights signed a formal food recovery agreement with St. Anne's. Marcus publicly apologized to Sophie before the entire staff and introduced management training on fair investigations. Nora became the food safety coordinator between the restaurant and the community kitchen. David was restored to his position and became head of compliance, reporting directly to an independent committee instead of the foundation's executives. Lucas stayed away from St. Anne's for several weeks. He did not want to turn the kitchen into a stage or pressure Sophie into feeling grateful. When he returned, he brought no check and no photographer. He arrived early, reviewed the allergy list, arranged chairs, and washed the large cooking pots. Sophie watched him return regularly, follow her decisions, and never mention the money he had restored. One evening, after the final child had eaten, Lucas stood beside the sink. "Would you like to have coffee somewhere that has nothing to do with work?" Sophie remained silent. She had once feared becoming an inspirational story repeated at fundraising events. 6 months of consistent action had not erased every wound, but they had given her a reason to believe his change existed even without cameras. "I cannot promise anything beyond one conversation between equals." "That is enough." The following evening at St. Anne's, Jamal collected his peanut-free food container, then returned. "Miss Sophie, may I have another one for my mother?" Sophie handed him 2 containers, one for tonight and one for tomorrow morning. She did not ask him to thank her. Behind them, Lucas was washing pots in an old apron. There was no Grantwell banner, no camera, and no one in the kitchen cared that a millionaire was standing beside the sink. Sophie looked toward him. Lucas did not turn around to see whether she was watching. He simply continued washing the final pot because the work needed to be completed. A small smile appeared on her face. What allowed Sophie to open her heart had never been the envelope containing $5,000. It was Lucas choosing truth over reputation, responsibility over excuses, and continuing to help after no one was watching. A large amount of money can purchase food. Only honesty can build trust. Sophie had returned the money because she refused to let kindness become a performance. In the end, what Lucas gave her was not a tip. It was truth, accountability, and the right for the community to decide its own future.